Good morning, everyone. Slightly early webinar today. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. This is covering the Audit Advanced Mercia release, version 24.0.01. Actually, a lot of that content is concerning the ISA 315 updates, which we'll be going through in some detail during the session. My name is Tom Jeffrey. I'm one of the education and media technicians at Caseware UK. I'll be making sure everything's running smoothly, and I'll be monitoring your questions and that sort of thing. And I'm joined by our subject matter expert, Jonathan Miller, our product manager for audit. Hi, Jonathan.
Hi there, you're right.
And we're going to be, as I say, going through some content which you'll see on our agenda in a moment, but largely to do with ISA 315 updates. Just a quick bit of housekeeping here, so you can see the control panel there in Zoom. If you're not familiar, you've got the option to enter any questions into the Q&A. We are recording the session. That was a question that we've had in already. So we are recording the session, and that recording will be made available on our YouTube channel. We'll also put that on the knowledge base with a copy of any questions and answers that come up during the session. Keep an eye out in the chat as well. If you have any technical issues, can't hear us, that sort of thing, you can pop it into there and I'll sort that out for you. You've also got the option to raise your hand and I can unmute you if you'd like to ask a question live via your microphone. But that's the end of the housekeeping. That's that out the way. So we'll just jump onto the agenda and I'll hand over to Jonathan.
Well, thank you very much and good morning, everyone. Nice to see you all with us. I've got 60 odd attendees at the moment, so that's really good. Obviously, this is a very important update. We've also got one or two of our friends from Mercia, I know, on the call this morning, so I'm sure if I get anything too far wrong, they can put me right toward the end. So, as we say there, we've got the agenda that we're going to just go through. We're going to first of all have a look at the updated document numbering system that Mercia have put in place. And then we're going to focus for a little while on the new risk module. So we've got a new risk dialogue in Caseware with some new fields, same with the controls as well. And then how that fits in with the new documentation that Mercia have put together for us to carry out that inherent and control risk assessment and looking at risk levels at the assertion level and also the design implementation of controls as well. Then we'll have a briefer look at some of the new documents that have been introduced, just a brief overview of those, just so you can get a feel for the template. And then the other significant changes that have come about as well. And then at the end, we'll explain how you can get your hands on this template and to try it out later on. So let's go on to the screen. So I'm going to hopefully share my screen and we'll go to the document manager. So here we are on the document manager. Most of it is the same, but there's some significant changes on the B planning. So Mercia have taken the opportunity of this update for ISA 315 to, I suppose, rationalize the planning process and make it a bit more structured, so that there are certain sections which you will go through and you'll review each section. So obviously you start off with the planning checklist. That's moved to B01 now. I'm just about getting used to these numbers, but it will take a little time for you because it does have those consequences of it. There are some new documents around, like audit strategy. The engagement quality control view, which we'll talk about a bit later, has been moved up to B03. Then there's a section on engagement review. So you go through that as B from B10 onwards. That sort of takes in that section. Then you've got the information gathering section starting at B20, which also takes in the estimation and the design implementation of controls. And then, of course, you've got the inherent risk assessment section continuing on from B30. And then there's the more administrative elements towards the end with the B35 and a B41. So that's the basic outline. And as I said, we'll go through and have a look at some of the newer documents in there in a little while. But first of all, I thought the best place to start would be, and the bit you're probably most interested in, is indeed on the planning side. So yeah, on the risk assessment. So hopefully you should still be able to see that screen. So the planning checklist is basically as you were. Obviously a few changes, consequentials of the renumbering system and the like. But what we do have is a new risk dialogue, and we'll go through this, and we'll see that the risk dialogue is and the risk assessment whole thing is an iterative process now. So it's one that we sort of build up, and you'll go from the risk dialogues, and then you will look at the recording of those risks elsewhere on the screen. So you'll see we've got a few more fields now within the risk dialogue. So for instance, we've actually got the inherent risk factors now listed out. So these are ones that come from the ISA, that are things you're to consider, or the factors that may impact on inherent risk. You can also assess an individual risk by the likelihood of it happening and the magnitude of it happening. This is that new spectrum idea of a risk falling on a spectrum. So if something is high magnitude, so it's a big likely have a big impact, say at a level 5, but perhaps the likelihood of it is only low. Therefore, you'll estimate the overall inherent risk as somewhere being in between those elements. Also, if you're going to look at controls testing, you can look at the controls risk and see if that can mitigate some of the risk of material misstatement, and then you'll get your final residual material misstatement risk level. I've also got added a new button for fraud risk. So basically any fraud risks will be considered a significant risk, so you would have to select both. But we've also got these extra ones because that's the extra bits that also come in with ISA 240 as well, that focus on fraud as well. So I think probably what the best thing to do is now actually have a look at the new B30 document that Mercia have provided us with. So this is now the risk assessment module. This is where the real focus of the work is going to take place. You obviously will have considered all the sections as you go through the planning, through the permanent section and the planning section. Those risks will build up, and you'll start building those up through the risk dialogue as you go along. You will then start filling out and assessing those risks at this stage. And so you've got to consider the risks at the financial statement level. We have our two standard risks, the management override of control and revenue misstated. Those are ones that are within the template already. And then you can just click on here and you can add a risk below it. And you can obviously fill that out individually. Just going to remove that one for now. You've also got to consider the fraud risk at the financial statement level. And then this is the biggest section really, is the risk of material misstatement at the assertion level. So obviously all those risks you're looking at, you will have assessed those as applying to specific audit areas. They will have impact on certain assertions. And this is where you're going to record and estimate the likelihood of these things happening. So this is where there's the interaction between the risk dialogue and this document. We still have what is now the B31, that's the risk report, that's the risk summary over here. But this isn't a you can't do too much. We can't do too much narrative on this section. So what Mercia have now done is produce extra documents in their paper manual, which support the risk risk misstatement at the assertion level. And you will actually have a look at individual assertions, and that's what we're going to do. And we've actually we'll show you how we've accommodated that on this screen here. And as I said, this is really an iterative process with the work that is being done. So this is the summary screen, but if we click on our little drop down there, little expansion, we have a bit more narrative that we can add as we're going through. So you'll look at what is the risk, you will record the assertions that those apply to, and then you'll start thinking about, and you'll be assessing the inherent risk. We've got the inherent risk factors sitting here again, and there's lots of guidance all the way through. So keep clicking on the little red buttons, because they do provide a lot of the footnote guidance that is on the Mercia documentation. And then we'll assess that level. We'll assess the likelihood of misstatement, the magnitude of misstatement, and also therefore an overall inherent risk of materiality for each of the relevant assertions. You can then assess control risk. If you say the control risk is not applicable, that little section will then disappear because you don't need to do it. But if you are going to do some control testing, then you will obviously assess your control risk, and that will give you then your risk of material misstatement to the assertion level. So I've recorded all that stuff on there, but I've also, that actually ties in with a risk that I have pre-created on here. Now, I might just take a couple of seconds for it to render itself as a management override. So this will, I have a feeling this would happen. Come on. There we go. Right. So this is that risk I've been assessing. So this is the completeness and accuracy of revenue risk. So we'll come on to this. You will have done your risk assessment here, and then you want to transfer all that information to the risk dialogue itself. So we can see the types of information we've got recorded already, and we're replicating that over now on the risk dialogue, and we'll show you why that's quite useful and important later on. So I've suggested here the likelihood of misstatement on this one is high, but the magnitude of that misstatement is relatively low at, say, 2, which gives me it's only a sense that you provide a judgment why you think the inherent risk level is 3. So now we've got this range now of 1 to 5, low to high, rather than the high, medium, lows we had before for each of those levels of risk. The control risk is at an option of high, moderate, or low, or not applicable, as we just discussed earlier. So that's available on this drop down, not on that one, on that drop down. So that's the not applicable, high, medium, and low. And then you can assess, okay, I've looked at that, I've mitigated my risk with controls work that I'm going to do, so my overall risk is low. But I'll still say it was a significant risk. So what you're going to find here potentially is that not every risk that you want to record, I think, on the B30 will, you won't necessarily want to record every risk on the B30, but you will have built up your risk as you've been going along, but you should start matching these two together. And we'll see how that flows through, as I said, in a moment. On this document, then, you've also got the fraud risk at the assertion level to consider, and then you've got various standback assessments. And if you answer no to some of these, then you've got extra considerations to take into account and comments to add, and then you've got your overall conclusion of your assessment stage. So that's quite a bit more intricate, a lot more detail. As I said, we can shrink it up to the summary table, and you can add risks and remove them accordingly just on these right-click buttons, and you've got as many as you therefore like to include. You've actually only got 5. We're giving you 5 assertions. I don't think there's probably any more need for any individual risk to have more than 5. If you're finding that is a problem, then obviously speak to us and we'll see what we need to do about that at a later stage. So now all this risk gathering that we've been assessing, we flow that through onto the B30 FSA. So as I said, I've got the standard revenue recognition risk in. I've also got this new risk that I've just created. Now that risk that I created, I allocated to completeness and accuracy. The standard risk was only allocated to completeness. And what happens is when we come into the FSA, when we're looking at the risk by assertion level now, based on all those risks that you've gathered over your planning process, we will now get what is called a proposed level of overall of risk of misstatement at that individual assertion level. And that will take those and look at them all and hone them down and give you a suggested level of risk for each of those assertions. So you can see there's a discrepancy between the completeness and the accuracy one, because although on that new test that I created, I'd only had an accuracy of 3 for completeness, because the revenue recognition one defaults to 5 as high, therefore is giving you that suggestion of 5. The rest all default to 1 because at the moment we've got no risks associated with them. And obviously you can click on these and you can highlight those risks. And as I said, you can build up this iterative process of making that overall assessment of your risk at the assertion level. We then consider control risk. Now, we've actually defaulted the control risk to not applicable. That's just a standard, in which case the inherent risk and the residual, the risk of material misstatement that comes at the end will be the same. If it's also control risk is high, even though you're doing some work, but you've assessed the control risk as high, again, it will be the same level, the inherent risk and the actual risk of material misstatement. But because ISO 315 now asks you to consider this control risk, if you do manage to mitigate your inherent risk by some of the control risk, and you've actually found, like we suggested, that our control risk is low, that has an impact on the proposed level of residual misstatement that we've got. And so again, we've got this option to click on the drop down and pull in a proposed. And so that will just bring in based on a matrix, a suggested level of risk of misstatement for each of those assertions based on everything that has been considered. All the risks you've considered, the control risk you've considered, and how that's now fed through. You can, though, at any time overwrite any of these, and you'll see when you do so, there'll be a little red marker on the screen, which will just indicate that you've overridden that as from the proposed level. So again, you can justify all these. Nothing is fixed, but at least you've got this guide which is giving you that suggestion going forward. And when we go into the individual work program, should find therefore at the table here, we've got those proposed levels being brought through into our audit program. So that's where we are with the risk module. Obviously, if you've got any questions on that, note them down now, and we'll have a look at those perhaps at the end if you want a bit more clarification. We've also got the design implementation of controls. Now, this is another major change by Mercia. Again, it's really trying to focus on this separation of the inherent risk and control risk that comes through the ISA. And again, here we will be looking at individual controls. Why have they been identified? There's 5 options as to why they will come as a result of what we've been looking at. Maybe it's a control that addresses the risk of a significant risk on B30, and so you just record that in your list here, and then you've got extra considerations as you're going through. So you'll want to assess, well, has it been designed effectively? If it has it been implemented correctly? And then, and only then, do you then consider, well, am I actually going to test the operating effectiveness of it? Because you can only get that control risk reduction if you're actually testing the operating effectiveness. And therefore you'll record there, and you record the results of your operating effectiveness. So these are, again, Mercia have produced these what are called B24A, B, C, D, E documents, which contain this type of information. We've also got the control procedures summary, and if we look on our control dialogue, we'll see we've got a few more fields on here as well. We've got the financial statement areas, business cycles affected as before. We're also going to we'll record here, is it an indirect control or direct control? What is the type of control? Is it automated or manual? What is the frequency of the control? When does it occur? And is it a key control? And then you'll want to consider, as before, whether you're going to pass it through to your work through an observation. So you'll go to your work program where you're going to consider that. You'll estimate, you can estimate your design. So again, it's this iterative process where you can work with the B24 document and the summaries we're getting, and you can and then fill out these fields as we're going through. Has it been implemented satisfactorily? What type of work through we're going to do, and then have we tested the operating effectiveness of it? So it really tries to build up the whole picture of the controls that you're going to be looking at as well, and obviously feed that into how that may mitigate against the risks that we've got at our material misstatement. So, as I said, that's the main thrust of the work that we've got on that controls and risk section. Have we had any questions in yet at all, Tom?
Apologies, just scrambling for the mute button there. We haven't got any more questions at this stage, but please don't hesitate to submit those, and then we can have a look at those.
I mean, obviously it's a lot to take in, and as I said, what we're trying to do is we'll explain later on. You'll be able to take this now and start having a look at it and getting a feel for it and making sure that it's makes sense to you before you start your work in earnest later on.
Actually, Jonathan, we have got a question. We've got a couple of questions that have just come in. First one is, are there plans to automatically populate the information added to the new risk screen, in brackets detailed, to the old risk screen summary, considering that you mentioned copying information across so the risk summary page matches the detailed screen? It seems it would be much more efficient if this was auto-populated.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
And we've also got, if we don't plan to test controls, do we leave control risks as not applicable, or do we set as high?
Yeah, I understand. I mean, again, the people from our friends from Mercia can correct me on that, but my understanding from reading their templates, their manuals, are that it's not applicable. If you're just not going to get involved in that at all, it would be. The question is a very good one, Jordan, on the assessment. As I said before, in actual fact, if I go back here, the risk summary screen, the old risk summary screen, if you like, is still populated with a lot of that information. So you've got the likelihood, you've got the magnitude, you've got it actually gives you a combined score. I think it's a multiple of the two. And obviously the recording that you've done of the inherent risk, it records whether it's a significant and a fraud risk. It also has your responses on there. So all that information is still there. What we can't do at the moment, unfortunately, is automatically transfer it to here, or vice versa. So is that working together between the risk dialog and this screen, where you will be able to record your risks overall? Because obviously this screen can get very big, obviously, as any risk screen can. So it's just trying to find the best way of being able to do that. The difficulty we had with the old risk summary is the lack of ability to put narrative text in there. Okay. Anyway, training admin would like to answer that question live. So,
oh, apologies. I'm just clearing off the questions. They're being too efficient. So no more questions at this stage. But
right.
Please, we've got a question just come in, but I can save that for the end if you like. If you want
I see the combined score one. Okay, well, we'll come on to sampling form a bit later on. So the sampling form takes your overall, your level of materiality, your RMM that you come back to at the end. That's what that comes into your sampling form. We'll have a look at that a bit later on. Okay, so what I thought we'll do then now is just go through a few of the new documents that have been introduced that you might not be familiar with in the past. Quite a few have moved around, as we've said, but they still exist. Some have been repurposed, some numbers have been repurposed, some have been combined with other documents. So there is I think there's a full mapping on Mercia's what's changed document. So they've got that all listed out as to what goes to where, and we'll have a look at that perhaps a bit later as well, but that'll be included in the audit procedures manuals, which we will send out, which will make available as well as downloads. So the first one, I'm just going to go through the permanent then planning sections and do it that way. Generally, we've got a new one called applicable financial reporting framework. So on this document, you just need to go through and assess that you understand the applicable reporting framework. This is just an extra one that's been put in there, so that therefore you understand the risks that arise out of that, potentially for relating to fraud or the risks in ISA 315. And it's a fairly straightforward checklist. There's place there to record your notes as well underneath, and all the risk factors and everything. And as I said, this is what you start building up as you're going through here. You'll start recording your risks, and then you'll assess those risks at a later stage at B30. We also have as I mentioned before, we've got some new documents which sort of summarize where you are in the file as you're going through the planning section. So for instance, on audit strategy, you've got a whole load of information on here to think about what you're going to do within the audit and how that strategy is going to be tackled. We've also got a section at B10 now for engagement review, and then that's just going to summarize the information that's been coming up from the other documents. So from your reappointments, those have all been shifted forward a number. The assessment of reappointment compliance with ethical standards, new client checklist where that's relevant. That's now B13 when you fill it in, and then you save it at PF3-1. And there's also a new document on opening balances. So this is regardless of whether it's a new, sorry, in fact, obviously a new file probably wouldn't be relevant. So on an existing file, whether you've been the auditors or not, you will then want to be considering the opening balances. And then you've got some questions here. So actually, if it is the first year, that clicks off and that's the end of it. And then you've got options. Was it audited by us? Was it audited by another firm? Or was it indeed unaudited? And depending on those questions, with selection, you will get different questions appearing in the section further down, which you then obviously have to address before you conclude that the opening balances, whether opening balances contain misstatements that would materially affect the current period's financial statements. So that's an extra layer that's been put in there. At B20, well, actually, I'll just go through here while we're in this section. The signed audit engagement letter has now been moved up. So that's been moved from B25 up to B15. So that's a new placeholder. So you just may need to move your existing one to this new placeholder so that it doesn't start clashing with the materiality document. Information gathering, as I said, this is another sectional summary. So you're going to be having considered your data analytics, if that's what you're going to use, your communication with management, preliminary analytical review, and then this design of controls that we've been looking at in your materiality. So this is really trying to pull that information in together. And it's just, I say, very simple summary documents, which are there just to, if you like, provide those stepping stones as you're going through the audit process. We've also got a new document at B34. Now, this may be the one that opens up slightly blank. It didn't, thank you. On occasions, you may find a document opens up blank, and that's just a rendering issue within Caseware. If you close it down and open it up again, it will come out fine. So this is, again, your fraud risk assessment. This has sort of taken the place of the fraud risk analysis screens that were there, that considered before. And it's very similar to the going concern risk assessment. So at the top, you'll have a series of risk factors relating to here, fraudulent financial reporting and misappropriation of assets. So you'll consider those as you're assessing and concluding on the evaluation of the fraud risk within the template, within the entity. And obviously anything you're highlighting here, you're going to want to push forward to the risk module, as we've said, so you'll want to include it on the B30. While I'm in considering risk, there is a new document to A as well. It's the only one, I think, in the A section. I can be corrected if I'm wrong on that one, but I think it's the standback provision on fraud update and evaluation. And again, it's a fairly standard checklist to go through and consider as a standback approach as you're going through toward the end of your audit process. And there's various conclusions you're going to want to make on that as well. The other two, perhaps just to mention then on the planning section, is we've now got two sections, one called two documents, one called audit team discussion and one called audit team briefing. Now, this might seem like it's a repetition for you guys, but in actual fact, this is a deliberate effort to start off with the audit team discussion. That's really the initial discussion that you're taking prior to risk assessment. So this is the team get together led by the RI. They'll discuss before you're actually doing your risk assessments, before you complete your audit plans or anything like that, you have that brief initial discussion as to what is the likely approach on the entity, on this entity. Then you sort of do a stand back after you've done all that work, after you've done your risk assessment and you've considered your audit plans and you've got everything in place. You need to have another briefing. So this is what is now at B41. And this is another briefing prior to the fieldwork commencing. And again, what it does, it just confirms that agreed approach. Has anything changed since we had our initial discussions? And it's really trying to feed that, again, an iterative process into the planning process that you can then have that stand back and think, are we actually doing this audit in the right way? So those, I think, are the main in new documents that have been introduced. I don't think I've missed any. Again, I'm willing to be corrected by our friends at Mercia if I've omitted anything. One or two other significant changes, then I'll just before we wrap up, and we'll go through these fairly swiftly. What was the old PF15, which was a list of group entities, that has now been combined with PF1-4. So we put it in PDF1-4-2. So we've got your related parties, group entities, and others in the same document. Now, what was the old group analysis, risk analysis of I think we called it B32_PF3-3. That is now sitting at PF1-5. Now I can't show you that because the file I've created here was just a basic non-group straightforward audit file. Sampling form. Now, someone asked about the sampling form. So that still sits under here. But if you're wanting to do a sampling in a particular section, you just copy the document down there. And we have now got these extra elements come in from those other audit areas. So if we were in H, we were looking at income, and we were looking at the completeness and the accuracy. If you remember, that's what we had looked at. You can see there this new risk assertion that we've got is feeding in to our completeness and accuracy scale down here. We've also got new level of deductions, which is the 1 to 5 assessed in the risk population. So you can see if you've got a high risk of 5, then you'll be wanting to click on a 5. If you're wanting a 3, then obviously you'd click on your 3 instead, and that would change the deduction. So that's where that information can now will feed through into the sampling form. Another important one I think to mention at this point is the engagement quality control review. Obviously not too many quality control reviews necessarily will be done, but you've got to be aware now of, I'm sure most of you are aware now, we've got new quality management standard which is coming in from the 5th of December 22, which replaced the old quality control standard. So there's now a question in the prelim which is asking you, is your audit going to be in progress after the 15th to the 12th? Because if it does, then you'll need to follow, if for an enhanced quality control review, you'll have to follow the new ISQM documentation. And we've actually combined those within the same document. So depending on which selection you choose, you'll be given the correct documentation for the enhanced quality review that will be undertaken. We've chosen to go with the name going forward, so it's going to be called enhanced quality review rather than enhanced quality control review as it used to be called, but yeah, that's more of a slight technical matter rather than anything else. I mentioned already about the new client chat list being at B13 for if it is a new client. But then once you've recorded that, you've now got a placeholder at B3-1 for the new client checklist placeholder. So that's where that is going to go. And as I mentioned before, we've got the B25 moved up to B15. Also another placeholder for company searches, which has just been added in the Mercia working papers. We have deleted a few documents. So the old fraud analysis and risk analysis documents, they've really been superseded now by the documents that we've got now at B30 and also of course at B34. And we've also removed the financial reporting framework risk analysis and assessment documents. They are part of the supplementary document pack, and again they're available as a download from our website. And then finally, I'll just show you one more thing. We've now, the key accounting estimates, they've moved from B30 to B32. You also notice data analytics has moved from B20 to B21, just as a consequence of other changes. But with that, that means that we could well have had documents, key accounting estimates stuck in with their old number. So here's an old key accounting estimate, and we'd created this last year, B30QA. So what we have done within our document, when you come to this, the summary here, it will give you a warning that actually, you know, you've got some B30Q documents already sitting there. and you need to rename them because otherwise you're not going to be able to identify them from here. They're going to be renamed to B32. So we just click on this, and this is to do this first thing. That should then convert all those relevant documents. The B30Q is now here, 32QA is now there, and you see it's been renamed. Now, we've done that so that you obviously got a record of your old estimates. Mercia have made some changes, of course, I think as part of the work they've been doing to the key accounting estimate documents. So you may want to consider whether you're going to create new ones anyway. But that facility is there if you just want to save that little bit of time to be able to convert your old key accounting estimate documents to the new B32 documents. But you must do that before you start creating any of the others. And I think that is the whirlwind tour that I have given. So I'm going to stop that share. We can go back to you, Tom. I can see some of the questions, and then we'll move on to our closing statements afterwards.
I've just brought up the release schedule information there, but we're of course ready for us to have a look at that.
Okay, yeah,
I'll come on
to that in a second. Let's just perhaps do with one or two of these.
Okay, I think we've got a couple we can answer quickly. I think so. Has there been any change to accounting estimates documentation?
Yes, I just answered that one. Yes, there has been slight changes. They're relatively inconsequential, but they're significant enough, but to obviously be required. So they are in there. So any new documents that are created will be created with that full new accounting documents in there.
Just above that one, is there still the option for the free-form simplified planning document? Presumably that's still sitting.
That certainly will be there. It is actually the last one that we're working on right now. I am leaning at the moment, and this is the way we are developing this, is that we will actually use the B30 and B24 files that have already been created. It seems a bit silly to create those within that freeform document, but you'll just link out to those little sections to consider, because in actual fact, the considerations, even if it's in a freeform simplified, you've still got to consider those type of the risk and material misstatement at those assertion levels anyway. An audit is an audit, even if it's a more simplified one.
We have actually had a couple of queries about case studies or examples of standard audit planning and completion. The first question being, does Mercia have a model working papers file? The other question being that Mercia, or the other comment being that Mercia had a case study for the new documents included for ISA 540. Is there a similar thing for new documents under 315?
Yeah, I say we do have one or two members from Mercia here, so if any wish to volunteer and join us on this one and speak, then you're more than willing to. We can probably put your hand up. If you raise your hand, we can find it. Although we've got two options.
We've got two hands
David and Joe.
raised.
So
excellent.
should we let Joe
okay.
on? There we
Let's
go.
See if I can. Yeah, okay.
I think I've unmuted you, Joe.
Oh, thank you, Jonathan. Yes, there is an example working papers file. It just shows you the documents that we complete for the planning completion, and I think we go a little bit in depth into the G section. That will be updated. Training is going to be put on our website for our manual users, and I presume at some point we will discuss how we roll this out for Caseware users as well. So yeah, but there will be training available probably in a couple of months' time.
Thank you very much. Hope that answers the question. Thank you very much, Joe.
Thank you. I think that the last one there at the bottom is we had a couple of questions about Mercia manual. I know that previously we've included Mercia manuals as a download option.
Yeah, well,
knowledge
when we're clear about what that means, we provide the procedures manual and the extra bits, the letters and the reports and those elements that goes in. Those will be available for download. I actually built all those yesterday, so I'm going to hopefully getting those pushed up to our website very soon for those in the download section. But obviously they have to be behind the firewall protection section, because it is Mercia's proprietary information, of course.
I think that's everything for the questions that we have at the moment. We will be producing a Q&A document. I think it's fair to say, based on the number of questions we've had, and that will be on the knowledge base with the recording. And we'll get back to you directly if we haven't done so on the session.
Okay, so I'd just like to talk about the plans for this release. As you say, we've got it pretty much in position now. I say that I am just doing one last bit of work on the freeform planning memo and some consequentials that affect the dashboard as well. So those are being tested. This is all it's all within our QA team at the moment. I'm quite busy this week and I'm off next week, so I'm going to suggest that we'll be able to have that available. If anyone wants to have a look at this, this is for a soft release only, because I do need to talk through the implications of actually installing this template as it stands right now. It is just for the company only at the moment, and this is really either for you to be able to have a look at and to get to more familiar with it before everything starts in earnest in the autumn time. Or of course you may have a short accounting period, which does start after the 15th of December last year, which will need to be under this new regime. If that is the case, then reach out please, and we will have that discussion and see what we can do in terms of obviously getting this to you. So we're not going to send it out right now. We're not going to do like one of our normal releases where we send out an email and say go and download it. I would like this to be by request only, and we'll keep a record of those that we have given it to, because there is that, I suppose, that potential that we may just be able to enhance it when we get some feedback from early users. So if you email that address there, audit-uk@caseware.com, that will come through to us, and we'll be able to record your requests for this soft release, and then we'll be able to arrange to get that out to you and perhaps talk you through the process if you're wanting to look at it and test it in full tilt, as it were. The full release then is going to be later on in the year. Obviously there's a timing issue here. As soon as you've installed this template, you've now got the functionality for version 24.01 for the ISO 315. So that's why we sent out version 24.0s earlier in the year, so that you could start at least converting up to the functionality, so that if you have audits that don't go under ISO 315 and you don't want to run them under ISO 315, at least you've got the version 24 functionality. But as soon as you've installed this and then you start doing a functionality update, you will get the new all this ISO 315 stuff that you've just seen. Obviously you might not take the documents, but you will get the background stuff, particularly on the risk dialogues and the like. So as before, we were hoping we want to do this all in one go. So the charity, the LLP and the pension schemes audit at the same time, because we know, again, that it's a regular feedback. You don't want the drip effect, but you want them all at the same time. You want them early enough, but you don't want them too early, obviously. So we will hopefully release all those to you at the same time, probably end September, probably earlier in October. And then just a quick note on Academy audit. I know I'll have some of the Academy audit users here. We're not putting the ISO 315 into Academy. Most should start off obviously at the 1st of September 21. So therefore they fall outside the ISO 315. We've certainly had that feedback from one or two clients that say, please don't put that in. So we haven't. So the one that is due to be out very soon is non-ISO 315. If you have a very short accounting period for one of your academies and you need to actually do it under ISO 315, we will have to obviously have that as a separate discussion with you. But again, you can reach out to us and we can try and sort any difficulties. Now, in terms of the release for that, I think we received it about the 11th of July from Mercia. So we usually try and turn that round well, we usually say 5 to 6 weeks, but thankfully the update was a fairly limited one. It was really trying to catch up the best practice updates that had been pushed through the other templates. So in actual fact, we've managed to get the content written already in those. So it's currently with our QA team. And so again, we are hoping to be able to, obviously we know you need to get this out as soon as we can. So we're aiming for that release again in that week commencing the 8th of August for that. And that's it from me, really. And so unless there are any more questions, anyone wants to stick their hand up or anything like that?
Not currently. We are in sort of extra time, so I think I'll just breeze through the wrap up, but you can continue to submit your questions, and we'll get back to you after the session. So I'll just jump to the next slide. Up next on our webinar schedule is the Academy Accounts Advanced EPAC release 40602. That's on the 17th of August. But you'll see our full schedule of webinars at the events page, caseware.co.uk/events. We also will promote the upcoming sessions on our LinkedIn page. If you're not familiar, that's our client services page, and that's got all the latest news and updates within the business. As mentioned, we've got our recordings, webinar recordings and quick vids on our YouTube channel, also client services. And finally, as it stands, knowledge base is kb.caseware.co.uk. Watch this space for a refresh of the knowledge base. That's going to be very soon. Don't worry, you will be redirected to the new site if you put in this address. But for now, kb.caseware.co.uk, and that will be for all of the guidance. And again, the recording of the session and the Q&A document. So that brings us to the end of the session today. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Jonathan, for the presentation. We hope you found it useful. Take care, and we'll see you on the next webinar.
Cheers.